Dooby-dooby-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Dooby-dooby-doo. All right. What's going on, people? Happy Friday. I have a couple special guests with me tonight. I have Rob Durden and Luci from Blue Moon Red Wine. Hey, guys, what's going on?
What's up,
How are you
Sabby?
today?
All right, guys, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone watching on Rockfin, everyone watching on YouTube, and those of you watching on Twitter. We have an interesting conversation tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to show you what we'll be talking about. Show my thumbnail here. Let me pull it up. All right. All right, here we go. So tonight, we're going to talk about cringe takes on the left. And the people that you see in this thumbnail are the ones we're going to be referencing. I think we're mainly going to focus on Kyle's cringe takes because it's just been insufferable. But that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And for those of you who are new, I want to let you know Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of the Fred Hampton Leftist Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Roundtable and Fridays for the Sabby Sabs show. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So one of the things I think that we've noticed over time is that some of the left YouTubers that I think all of us kind of like started off watching or we've been watching for a long time, we've noticed that this year in particular, after Joe Biden won, they have had some cringe takes. There's been a lot of defense for the squad and not holding them accountable. So I want to get like Luci and Rob, I want to get your opinion on this. Like, why do you think this is happening? And then I have a couple of clips we can go into.
Me or Rob?
You go ahead, Luci, if you want, or I can step in.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, there must have been something about them that was always a little bit like elitist. But I think the reason people got really angry about it, particularly this year, this year and last year, is because, we seem to have experienced the pandemic in a very different way than they did. And, for most of us, like personally, like I got COVID immediately, like I lost my job, it pretty much ended the career or whatever I had at the time. I was like watching ambulances just like outside my building all the time. They weren't even circling back to the hospital because they knew that if they just stayed downstairs long enough, someone would die. And then they would just take away the body bags. Like that was exactly what COVID was like in the boroughs of New York City. And then, it's a little bit easier to get a job now, but the economy still hasn't completely recovered. And, a lot of these YouTubers who said they were on the left probably spent the entire time at home watching Netflix and getting food delivered to them, and buying things on Amazon and from all of these companies that they say they're against. So like, I think that's the basic thing. And obviously there's other things that I have against them, but like, I think that's the basic thing.
Rob, what's your take on this?
Oh, I have a lot to say. I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to go after Kulinski a little bit hard, but first and foremost, he's kind of the guy who got me into politics to start off with, which is why I kind of go after him a little more than some of the other people in your thumbnail, like Sam Cedar. I do go after TYT quite a bit as well, too, because they got me into politics, and they were some of the people that taught me to critically think when it comes to politics. But back in the day, they used to be much more honest actors, I think, than they are nowadays. And I saw a drastic shift in the rhetoric of Kyle Kulinski once Joe Biden took office. And I'll explain that in a second, what that shift was. But it took me by surprise because I was so trained by Kyle Kulinski himself over the past half decade, watching him to think critically and to look into these things in politics in a critical way, that when he turned on me and a lot of his audience and started pulling these bad takes out of his you-know-what, we caught him. And it seems to me now, and I'll give you some data as we go along here, Kulinski seems to go after Fox News, CNN, right-wing YouTubers just fine. He seems to go after Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema just fine. You know who he doesn't challenge whatsoever? The Squad. He also does not ever go after TYT on false things that they've done on their show, meaning slandering Aaron Mate, being wrong on Russiagate. He doesn't go after them whatsoever. So what drives me crazy is that he's being very selective about who he decides to go after. And I see a pattern. He's not challenging power. He's challenging the right-wingers who don't have any power, demonizing, Trumpists and Republicans every chance he gets. Meanwhile, not giving that same critical eye or the same amount of attack to the Squad. And this is particularly because Kyle Kulinski founded the Justice Democrats. So if there's anyone that could have a little bit of influence on them that happens lefter, it's Kyle Kulinski, right? Same thing with TYT. He knows them personally. They have a very, very popular, but they have a very big channel, but they've been putting out bad content recently. But since he knows them and he has a huge platform, he has a unique leg to stand on when it comes to critiquing them, which I think he has a responsibility to do with his platform. So if I may just real quickly, over the last 2 months, Kyle Kulinski has gone after right-wing YouTubers, CNN, and Fox News 38 times. 16 times for righty YouTubers and 22 times for mainstream media. He has not gone after TYT once. How many times has he gone after the Squad? Twice for the same thing. Twice for the Iron. And then he went after her again for crying about it. That's it. Do you understand the greater picture that I'm trying to understand? That he basically, his narrative or his goals are to attack people that are never going to listen to him, that he doesn't have like any power to influence them whatsoever, but he's completely ignoring critiquing people that he actually does have a little bit of influence over. And that's the problem I have with Kulinski nowadays, is that like if you're going to go after, Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro once every 3 daes, fine. But I want to also see you going after Cenk Uygur and the Squad once every 3 days. But the numbers don't show that light in favor of fighting like goofy or the right wing who does not have any power. So I'll split that up a little bit more. That's my opening statement as against Kyle Kulinski.
Yeah, I want to say there's something that Bill just said, and I want to mention this point. Bill Bradley said your disagreement with Kyle is because you changed, not because he changed. And I want to reference that because I think it was, okay, maybe not last year. No, this was last year. Last year, I think I started to notice some things about Kyle that was questionable. It didn't make me stop watching him until it got to the defunding the police moment. So one of the things that I noticed was that when the subject of reparations came up, he said he was against reparations because he said, I mean, how are you going to decide who to give it to? Which that's really not any concern of his. That's really not his responsibility at all. That's something he needs to be thinking about. The second thing is when defund the police was popular at that point in time, the majority of Democrats actually supported defunding the police. Kyle Kulinski came on his show and said, well, I mean, I get it, but I don't think we should do it because it's not popular. And that was kind of like an alarm for me, because that said to me that he's really not going to push you to fight for something unless he's for sure that it's approved by the majority. Well, that's not being progressive. And so my thing is like, if you're only willing to fight for something, if it's popular, then you're not really a fighter. And so after that rhetoric, I decided, I don't think I'm going to watch this dude, anymore. And I started to move on to like other people. Aaron Fights for the People just brought up a good point and said Kyle loves playing the fence. And I've seen him do this numerous times too. When it came down to voting for Joe Biden, Kyle was like, well, I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying you should vote for Joe Biden, but if you vote for Joe Biden, I understand. And he does this often where he does like this middle thing so that he can be cool with people on both sides. When he tried to do that with the situation with TYT and Jimmy Dore, it backfired on him because that was one of those situations where, I'm sorry, dude, but you should have chosen a side. There was no reason to defend TYT in their smearing of Aaron Mate, period. And he tried to bring up the fact that people didn't come to his defense when that conservative, I don't remember his name, but that conservative released information about like his old tweets and stuff like that. But there was nothing to defend because you tweeted those things. And I think that for me, it just showed me that like, this dude really don't get it. Like, you can come on camera and you can preach these things to people. Yes, we should have Medicare for all. Yes, we should have, free college, that kind of thing. But I think it's different when you have the experience and you've actually lived it. If you have never had to fight for those things, if it's never been a sense of urgency for you, it's really easy to come back after forced to vote and say, oh yeah, I did it, but I don't think it was like the right strategy. Again, he was trying to play in the middle. I want to get you guys like take on that.
Yeah, he does that all the time. And the way that he does it is he uses false equivocation with TYT. The TYT is way wrong on the OPCW cover-up, and they've basically done terrible journalistic malpractice. But Jimmy Dore made a crass, comment about Anna's skirt at work. So therefore, it's kind of a wash. But no, those things aren't the same thing. And by the way, Jimmy apologized for that. So, it makes no sense for you to falsely equivocate those things. And here's the Kulinski dilemma, as I'm calling it, is that you can't spend a decade training your audience to be critical thinkers and then pull a fast one on them and not expect them to catch you, which is why he got ratioed on that take. So, and it's also a moral thing too, because he didn't even mention in that video that not only was TYT wrong on OPCW cover-up in terms of the facts, but they also committed slander. And he's never actually come out and said, no, they committed slander. They need to come out and retract that and apologize to Aaron Mate on their show publicly. But he won't do that. He's too big of friends with Cenk and Anna to do that, which makes him a coward. But then also, you're right, he plays the fence on a lot of these things, and it ends up looking ridiculous because there's clearly a right side and a wrong side on a lot of these things. And when you see the things that he's playing the fence on like that, it seems to tell you a lot about where his priorities lie and who his friends are. So that's what drives me crazy about him. He refuses to call out people that are causing immense amount of misinformation and harm to the populace, i.e. TYT and the squad, because he just so happens to know them personally. And you can't allow those relationships to derail the facts, and to, for God's sakes, don't be the can't we all just get along guy that wants the people that are on the wrong side and the people that are on the right side to just like meet in the middle on something, as if that's possible. Nobody likes that guy. Pick the right side and just, have a real opinion. He used to be better at this, but since Biden took office and he's kind of having to play defense against the squads because they actually do have some power at this point and they're not doing anything, and he is responsible for putting them in there. He's not critiquing them, and that drives me crazy because it's like, if anybody could get in AOC's ear, he probably has her number in his cell phone. They know each other. He's got 1 million subs. If he went on the warpath the same way that Jimmy did, we'd have hundreds of thousands of views per day, forcing the squad into doing something. And now, because they have not, meaning TYT and Kyle Kulinski have not forced the squad to do anything, we're staring down the barrel of a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill that used to be $6 trillion. And that's because they enable the squad to be anemic. And that's what drives me crazy because, I can yell at the squad all day long, but they don't listen to me. I don't have the audience. But if there's one person that has a big old, fan base that started Justice Democrats itself, that's Kyle. He has a leg to stand on. They might listen to him, but he won't critique them at all. And here we are. and he doesn't want nothing to do with that. Oh no, they're going to pass a $1.4 trillion bill that really needs to be $17 trillion because you enabled it to, Kyle.
Yeah, I noticed that Kyle was like friends with Anna Kasparian, and that it seemed like he wanted to agree with her, but also agree with the issue. So he talked about it as if it was just like a philosophical argument, you know? But when it comes down to it, you know, like I used to work as a waitress. I'm just going to give this as an example. And I got harassed so much on the job because I was like a teenager at the time. I have never seen someone so offended by this, like someone looking up her skirt, allegedly looking up her skirt, as this grown fucking woman, you know? And not only that, but she actually tried to derail the entire conversation about what is actually going on in Syria with this conversation about her skirt. And I thought it was the most deeply offensive thing, because guess what? There's also women in Syria. Like, her upper crust feminism does not take precedence over the women in Syria. You know, like, women in other countries matter too. You know, there's a conversation in this country about how Black women matter too. You know, immigrant women matter too. And personally, I found it disgusting. Like, I found Anna Kasparian's whole dramatic outleash on, like, her whole thing, it was disgusting. And, like, personally, I mean, part of what I found disgusting, and maybe I'm like, I was I don't know why I was personally offended, but part of it, I think, is because, you know, my parents were immigrants. Like, my parents did live through Operation Condor. I don't know if you know about Operation Condor, you can look it up. But feminism is a global issue. It's not just something that affects like women in offices like Anna Kasparian. So when you trivialize, like, you act like it's not important to get an issue that affects an entire country, you know, like an entire part of the world, you're ignoring all those women, because it's not just about you and your skirt. You know what I mean? Even if you got offended. So I just found it so disgusting that Anna Kasparian, like, you know, made it all about her, and that Kyle Kulinski supported her in this because he considers her like his friend, you know, his buddy. So like, I just feel like, you know, it may be, even in the case, that's like what people said, like they were trying to disprove it, like, oh, you know, Jimmy Dore didn't actually do anything bad. And that's fine as an argument. But like, my point is, even if he did do something bad, that is just such a low-key offense that I really don't consider it like a reason enough to dismiss this conversation about Syria. And I'm not saying I know everything about Syria. I really don't. I don't understand the situation perfectly. I try to like watch Richard Medhurst to help me understand it more. But, you know, your issue, Anna, is not more important than millions of women in Syria. And if you look at Richard Medhurst's videos, and if you look about even at like documentaries about women in Syria, you know, the refugee crisis causes issues for women in Syria. It's harder for them. Like, you know, there's even reports about them being forced to marry early, to like basically sell off their daughters because of this refugee crisis. It's disgusting. So no, Anna's skirt is like completely like, I don't care, you know, even if, okay, she got a little offended, even if it was actual harassment, I still consider it like a matter of not like high importance. I'm not saying it's not important at all. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important, but the way they were like trying to ignore a really big issue and like covering it up with that, it was just like, no.
And Jimmy did admit that he said it, and he apologized and then sent her a card the next day. He goes, I'm sorry. So the thing is that it's not a question of whether or not he said it. He did, but he's like, dude, I feel bad about it, so I apologize. So therefore, all the more reason for why would you go after him? What, like, 5 years later or whatever? It's directly designed to whitewash and obfuscate the situation.
Yeah. Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. Rob, we always go hardest on betrayers than foes. Thanks so much for the super chat, Roger.
Right. And that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I think that I want to play this video clip, but before that, I think that one of the things that I think has started to drive me crazy is that it just seems like to me that TYT and Kyle and others, they're still trying to keep us in the Democratic Party. Like they'll say when Bernie was running the last election, they'll talk about how bad the Democrats are, the establishment Democrats, they're so bad, they're horrible. God help us. But then they're still telling you to vote for this Democrat. And they're still telling you to vote for Justice Democrats, which it's been proven now that Justice Democrats now also has dark money. So anytime you bring up the idea to them to vote for third party candidates, he's heavily against it. No, we cannot vote for third party. It's not going to work. It's not a good idea. Like he slammed Movement for a People's Party. And I don't care if you like MPP or not, but still, at least somebody is trying to do something different. And I had to ask myself, why are they so against third parties? Why are they still trying to keep us in the Democratic Party? And the reality is, for those of you who don't know, the money in this is not on the true left. The money is in the center and on the right. So when Biden won, that's why you see some of these left independent media, you see them switching their tone and changing their tone and constantly defending the squad and making excuses for Joe Biden, because that's where the money is right now. And that's very important for people to know. There is no Bernie Sanders that's running right now. We're not in an election season. So I just wanted to point that out there for people. Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. Blue Moon Red Wine, you sign up for a week of action, campaign for New York Health, November 15th, 2021, to get New York Health Act passed in New York State. In New York State Senate Assembly leaders Stu Cousins and Heastie on board. Thanks so much for that, Roger. So I'm going to play this video. And this one is Progressives Hold the Line. So I think this one starts at, Rob, you have to remind me, is this the one that starts at 5:40?
Let's see here. The 5:40, yeah, 6 minutes in would be what the heck will happen with Biden's bill. The Hold the Line, I'm not entirely sure. I don't have it written down here. You can play most of if you play most of the Hold the Line video, you're going to get a spoonful of all the stuff that Kulinski's been putting out there lately, saying that the squad is actually getting stuff behind the scenes done, which 3 weeks later, now that we know where the bill is, looks ridiculous in hindsight.
Yeah, this is horrible. I watched this earlier. So this is the message that they're preaching now. So you guys got to check this out. Let me start it from the beginning. I'm going to mute my mic so I don't have an echo.
So let me give you all an update on what's going on right now with the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill. Pelosi had originally set the date of September 27th, that we're going to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure agreement by then. Then it was pushed back to September 30th. Then September 30th came. And as I told you guys in my last segment on this, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. One of the possibilities is that they push it off again. Well, that's exactly what happened. They pushed it off again. Well, apparently, centrists are absolutely fuming as a result of it being pushed off again. So here is Representative Josh Gottheimer. By the way, I think he's the top recipient or one of the top recipients of Big Pharma money. And he was one of the holdouts on the reconciliation bill. Here's what he said. This was either the night before what was supposed to be the bipartisan infrastructure vote, or the day of. Look at what he said.
Except that's not where the progressives are. And obviously, there's at least 45 or so that will vote against infrastructure if there isn't. At least now they're saying that they no longer need a vote first, but maybe an agreement, a pathway forward. If this all takes a couple weeks to sort out, not because obviously it's not happening tomorrow as you wanted, is that okay with you?
Well, let me just be clear about that. The bill is going to get voted on early this week, and it's going to come to the floor tomorrow as we wanted. And we feel very good about that. So I just want to be clear about that. And secondly, I believe when it does come to the floor, that we will have the votes.
Oops. So it did not come to the floor for a vote. And guess what? The so-called moderates, again, the corporatists, are fuming over that. So take a look at this. First, the smaller tweet there. News. The few House Republicans who are planning to support the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill are now rethinking their votes after Biden's visit to the Hill today, saying it's as clear as ever that the bill is linked to reconciliation. All bets are off, says Representative Don Bacon. Now, the bigger one, Bacon also said he talked to a moderate House Democrat who is furious with Speaker Pelosi for not keeping her promise to hold the infrastructure vote this week. And the Dem referred to Pelosi as a fucking liar during their conversation with Bacon. Now, it gets funnier, though. It gets pretty hilarious because Gottheimer wrote a letter and going after Pelosi and addressing it to her and saying that this is wrong and tried to get other, so-called moderates on board, corporatists on board. None of the others he reached out to would sign onto it, which means Pelosi still sort of has them by the balls. Now, where does the credit go for what went down? The answer is very simple, y'all. The progressives held the line. They held the line, and they stood strong. And they were like, we had a deal. The deal was these two bills go together. They go together. They are linked. If you're going to delink them, you're violating the deal. We're going to vote against it. There supposedly are about 50 House Democrats in the Congressional Progressive Caucus who are like, no, we're not bluffing. We're serious. If you bring this up for a vote now, it's going down. We're going to vote against it. We had a deal. We're going to abide by the deal. And that's the end of the conversation. So they held firm. They held strong and they flexed some muscle. And you know what? It worked. It worked. So you have to give credit where credit is due. You have to say good job. Because again, what would have happened if they voted on this bill and it passed? Reconciliation would have been totally dead and gone. Hold on, I'm going to pull up, as I always do virtually in every show. I should just keep this up for every show. The provisions of the bill, because this is what the House Democrats went to the mat for. Okay. Child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family leave, paid medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, dental, hearing, and vision, and Medicare expansion, housing, home care, major climate money, lower Medicare age, Obamacare expansion, and then, of course, tax increases on the wealthy. That's just some of the provisions. This is what they went to the mat for. And now they're in the driver's seat. So what have we been telling you all along? You have to play hardball. Because all the evidence shows that usually the left goes along to get along and they get obliterated and they don't even have a seat at the table and they always fall in line. Well, now they stood up. And since they stood up and since they fought, now they get a seat at the table. Now their voice matters. Now they're a force to be reckoned with. This is all we've been asking for all along. So listen, don't get it twisted. What's going on is still incredibly volatile. There's no doubt about it. But now it is much more likely that the top line number is going to be way higher than what it would have been otherwise.
Well,
I love that clip. I laugh so hard at that clip. That makes me so happy. I'm so glad that you put that on there. Okay. All those things that he just mentioned, they're going to the mat for 3 weeks ago, because that came out, I think, on October 4th. Right, so about 3 weeks ago, they're all gone. They're all gone. So what are you talking about? So what he's talking about, guys, and I broke this down in an episode on my show, right? Kulinski and Pramila Jayapal and the squad are now reframing the promise that they made in an attempted bait and switch. The promise 2 months ago or so, when this first started going on with the reconciliation bill being about 3.5 trillion, when that number was first being floated, they were like, no, we're drawing a line in the sand. It's going to be 3.5 trillion in its current form, or otherwise we will not vote for the $900 billion Republican bill, period. They will pass together, but it has to be in the $3.5 trillion form. Otherwise, we're not going to vote for it. But what they're doing now is, and Pramila Jayapal said this yesterday in a speech, she goes, don't worry, we're still holding up our end of the bargain. These bills will pass together. That's basically verbatim what she said. So you notice that she's choosing her words and she's not saying anything about the $3.5 trillion bill that was originally in the first promise. So what they're doing is a bait and switch here where they're saying, no, We didn't break our promise. The bills are going to pass together. That's what we said from day one, right? And Kulinski's running with the same narrative, saying that, oh, don't worry, the progressives are still going to make the bills pass together. So they are holding the line on the reconciliation bill. But that's not what the original promise was it, Kyle? The original promise was the $3.5 trillion, which was already the compromise on Bernie's $6 trillion bill. So what you're doing is you're manufacturing consent for a crappy infrastructure bill, and you're saying, well, it's okay if it passes because it's passing in tandem with the other really crappy bill, and that's what the squad promised from the get-go, which is a total lie. And that's why I love this clip, because you look at all those things that he just said, those, in hindsight, they look like terrible takes. Why is Kyle giving out these terrible takes? Because he's living in Kulinski land, where the squad is still do-gooders and they're not corrupt and they're still fighting for you. So he always gives them the benefit of the doubt. And then he looks like a ridiculous person when 3 weeks later, that $3.5 trillion bill is down to 1.5 and dwindling. And Kulinski has said, and I think we're going to talk about this later, Kulinski has said and theorized that the bill would end up somewhere between $2 trillion and $2.5 trillion. In what world? Because he says that Bernie and Manchin are duking it out, and they're having a tug of war between 3.5 and 1 trillion, which are that's what Bernie wants versus what Manchin wants, right? So he goes, oh, we're going to meet halfway. I assume that Bernie is going to just duke it out with Joe Manchin, and it's going to meet halfway. So it'll be something like 2 to 2.5 trillion. Do you actually watch politics, Kyle Kulinski? Because you've been in it for a decade. So Bernie never will get the same amount done and will never stand his ground the way Manchin does. So my prediction was 1.8 trillion on my show. And even I didn't estimate how crappy it would be and how little Bernie and the squad would negotiate to keep it up there, right? So this is why I get frustrated with Kyle, because his predictions are also crap, because he's got rose-colored glasses on for people like Bernie and the squad, which is why I've turned on him. I would love for him to go out and go after the squad and be like, no, you know what? Here's the deal. You guys, it's going to be 3.5 trillion like you guys promised, or else I'm going to wreck you on my show until you guys start negotiating like adults. But he never does that. And the roundabout way I'm trying to make this point is he enables the squad to not negotiate well by using kid gloves with them. And I get frustrated with that.
And you never hear, like, this is one of the things I noticed too, like, you don't hear them talk about other ways that you could help your community. You don't hear them talking about direct action, really. You don't hear them talking about mutual aid. You don't hear them talking about doing things outside of electoral politics. It's always through the Democratic Party. And I find that to be very worrisome. I never seem to bring on like third-party candidates. They don't talk about it's just, so I had to ask myself, like, they are basically being paid to continue to keep us in the Democratic Party because they have sponsors. We don't have like corporate sponsors. I mean, Kyle was a part of TYT. TYT had that $20 million. I know TYT let him go, but if you guys think that him, Crystal, and Sager, or whatever the heck that show collaboration is that they do, if you guys think they do not have any type of sponsorship, you are sadly mistaken. It's true, yeah. This is the message that they preach. And like, here we have Crystal and Sager recently preaching pro-war propaganda about China and right. Taiwan, saying that we should intervene. That doesn't make any sense. If you say that you care about the environment and you care about climate change, then why would you be pro-war? Because the military is the largest polluter that we have in the world. It's not trash. It's not or what do you call it? Even like the car emissions, the military is the largest polluter. We have people on the left who are out there preaching now saying that, yes, we should intervene. No. And that's why I say, for me being on the left, it means you have to be anti-war. You have to be anti-imperialist, because if you really care about the environment and the climate as much as you say that you do, then you would not be for war, because you know the military is a big polluter. Luci, what's your take? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Luci.
I mean, my take is like way more simplistic than Robert's. I feel like from the very beginning, Build Back Better is not a thing. It's just a slogan. Like, it is as bad as it sounds. So like instinctively, I actually like didn't even really look into it until I had to read those things because people were talking about it, you know, what's in and out of the bill. But like on the simplest level, Build Back Better, it's just like hope and change. It's like one of those vague things that doesn't mean anything. And if it sounds vague, that's because it is vague and because it means nothing. It means nothing. What would mean something? Because they just want to keep discussing the thing that the Democratic Party wants to discuss. And the Democratic Party wants to discuss Build Back Better. But we don't need to discuss Build Back Better. We need to discuss Medicare for all. We need to discuss affordable housing for all. We need to discuss ending the wars. Those are the things that we need to discuss. And we need to discuss some kind of like environmental policy. Those are the things that we need to discuss. We don't need to discuss Build Back Better. So like, it's almost like every time, like they just like keep pulling us into this rabbit hole. And it's just like, no, you know, it is this vague thing. Now they're building their whole campaign around discussing Build Back Better. And people like Kyle Kulinski and Sam Cedar and Emma Vigland, all of them are discussing Build Back Better, which is basically their marching orders. But we have no obligation to discuss it because we know it's bullshit because it is as vague as it sounds. And maybe it will pass. Maybe it will pass with another bill. Maybe it won't pass with another bill. I feel like the more you get sucked into analyzing it, the more you lose just like that instinctive thing, like that you feel where it just sounds super vague. You know what I mean? Like
it's definitely a cliche.
Yeah.
It's definitely a cliche, and that's exactly what they're doing. And Biden has been defended on Kulinski's show numerous times.
Yep.
I'll talk about that in a little bit. But to go to your point, Sabby, one of the only critical videos that he made of the squad, like I said, was on Iron Dome, right? The Iron Dome present vote by AOC. He went after her on that. But when he talks about the Iron Dome, he makes it very clear in that video that he's not for defunding Israel. He's just not for giving them extra money on top of their already established Iron Dome money. And then he even goes on to say in the video that his solution is to also give Palestine Iron Dome. So it's like he's fighting. He wants to like get rid of imperialism by adding more imperialism or getting rid of weapons by adding more weapons. No. And so that's, again, to your point, Sabby, is exactly right. He's also like an imperialist. And if he, and he might just do this, watch in the next couple of days, he might come out with a Taiwan video on his actual show saying how it's important for us to give defensive weapons to Taiwan, which is, by the way, a part of China. By the way, but they'll go, well, they're just defensive in nature. But then you look back at some of Kyle's old videos and he shreds people on talking about giving extra money to Saudi Arabia, Joe Biden, for defensive weapons against Yemen. So what are you talking about? There's clearly a narrative and you're being hypocritical, and it drives me crazy that you're right. He's for like soft imperialism. You're not really a lefty. What the hell, man? And so you're right. You said it very well, Luci. Build Back Better, bullshit.
I want to shout out some of the super chats. Thanks so much, Colin. Kyle is the person whose dad died due to lack of health insurance. So to his credit, talked about the marches for Medicare for all, but didn't show up for support. Well, for me, even if you couldn't show up for support, when he did talk about those marches, he didn't even have his information correct. He went on camera and was just like, I don't know where this started. I don't know who started this. That it was on Twitter. It was on Twitter all over the place, which we know he's on Twitter. You mean to tell me you couldn't just look on Twitter and type in Medicare for all marches? Do you know how many times we advertise that? Do you know how many? Marianne Williamson was a part of it, who's been on his show. To me, that's just lazy ass journalism. You easily could have looked that up and found out that information. Didn't even know who the activists were that took part in it. Shout out to Roger Meadows for the super chat. I was the guy who told you of Illinois 2022 initiative to add collect bargain amendment Illinois Constitution hookup. With HLM to inform us on Illinois government, more focus on state needed. Thanks so much for the super chat, Roger. And I think I have another one here. Just want to make sure I grab these really quick. Thanks so much for the super chat, Steve. This reminds me of Chevy Chase in Christmas Vacation. He was going to buy a pool with his Christmas bonus. Oh my God, that is cringe. Thanks so much, Steve. And thanks, Roger, for the super chat. I said it was before ballot measures are the way to go. You better come get you some New York vote. Yes, on all 5 ballot proposals, New York State passed paid family medical leave 2016. Yeah, so
Right.
these cringe takes are really concerning. Either you're anti-war or you're pro-war. These are one of those issues where you should not be on the middle end. So it's like you're either okay with imperialism or you're not okay with imperialism. There's no let me be in the middle of imperialism. Like it's really frustrating that we're hearing these same talking points from people that we kind of got introduced to left independent media with. They are now starting to sound like liberals. They sound like people that I work with. They sound like people who say that they're progressive, but they're really liberals. And it's really disappointing. And it's frustrating that it's come to this. There's another video, Rob. I want to play this one really quick. This is 3.5 bill. So this is the one I think that starts at 540.
That's right.
Okay, so let me scoot to that part.
It's where he makes his predictions on where this is going to go and gives some scenarios. And it's aged so poorly. It's the one I reference on my show multiple times.
Yeah, this is really bad. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, this is called What the Hell Will Happen with Biden's 3.5 trillion bill. So here we go. Let me mute my mic.
It's possible that there's some last minute deal where you do get Manchin and Sinema give a number, and then Biden and the House progressives counter with another number. And then let's say for argument's sake, it's $2 trillion or $2.5 trillion package. And you can whip the votes of the progressives very quickly. And then, or you get enough of them for that bill to pass with a reconciliation package of 2 or 2.5 trillion. And the bipartisan deal would then pass as well. That's possible. But right now, the thing that looks most likely is that this thing is going to get a vote. The bipartisan deal is going to get a vote as is, and it's going to go down. It's going to go down. And then we're in no man's land. I don't know what happens from there. I don't know where we go from there. But let's be clear. If that happens, it is 100% the fault of the corrupt corporatists, of the extremist right-wing Democrats. It'll be Manchin's fault. It'll be Sinema's fault. It'll be the right-wing Democrats in the House, because the original negotiation, the original deal was these bills go together. They don't go together. I don't want to hear it. So they renege on the deal. And what's going to happen is the media is going to point fingers at the progressives and act like it's their fault when they're the ones who are upholding the original deal. So the line of argument I want to see from the left now is, hey, we're the ones who are holding strong for the Joe Biden agenda. We're backing the president. You know who's not backing the president? You know who's agreeing with the Republicans? It's the right-wing Democrats. It's the corporate Democrats. It's the extremist Democrats. It's Manchin and Sinema. And by the way, we just got news that Kyrsten Sinema is meeting right now, with donors giving $5,800 a pop. And these are all donors who are against the reconciliation package. So maybe that's why she doesn't want to give a number, because there is no number, because she's planning on not running for re-election or changing parties or just getting out of DC and getting paid, son, becoming some sort of lobbyist. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe both Manchin and Sinema have thoughts of, I'm just going to leave DC, so I'm going to blow up this whole thing. I don't know. But they are definitely the problem. All we can do is hold our breath and sit back and watch how this unfolds from here.
Again, he's still not willing to blame the squad for their part in this. And he's doing that rotating villain thing where, oh no, it's Manchin and Sinema. This is exactly what Glenn Greenwald talks about. He won't acknowledge the fact that the squad is just as much as responsible for this. It's terrible. He's doing a disservice to his audience. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but he's lost a lot of subscribers. People are not buying into this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, I hope Jimmy takes him over.
Yeah,
I hope Jimmy overtakes. I hope you guys overtake him.
Yeah, Jimmy's on pace to pass him by about New Year's if he keeps growing at the same rate. I did a video on that. I don't think he's going to do that because Jimmy's growing so fast right now. It seems impossible that he'll keep it up for another 2 months. But to that clip that we just showed, the reason I love that clip so much is because he puts all of the blame on Manchin and Cinema, and he does a fair job on his channel going after those people. That's fine. But you notice that he goes, it's 100% on them. Right? He didn't say anything about how it's Biden's fault, even though it's his job to whip votes. He doesn't say that it has anything to do with Cinema or anything to do with AOC Inc., even though they have massive social media followings. And if they cared to whip Manchin and Cinema into shape, they could throw protests at their house. They could campaign in their home states. And even if I grant Kyle what he's assuming there, which is that Kyrsten Sinema is looking to get out of politics, there are still ways you can scare the shit out of her by getting a bunch of your followers to do what I've said on my show, which is badger the living hell out of her in her life. Follow her around and heckle her. No more boot shopping for Kyrsten Sinema at the mall without being called a jackass the entire time. She doesn't get to go cycling anymore without people taking slingshots and putting those plastic scorpions that you can buy at the dollar store and shooting them at her. There's a million ways that you can mess with Kyrsten Sinema and Manchin. And if you have 13 million people on social media that follow you, it takes just simply lifting your thumbs in a tweet to ask for help to make Manchin and Cinema's life hell, and you also have leverage over them. But he acts like the squad is doing everything that they can, and he also, again, falsely says that the original deal was the bills go together without mentioning that it actually is the $3.5 trillion bill goes together in tandem with the crappy Republican bill. So you can see, again, he's opening it up rhetorically for what Pramila Jayapal was talking about yesterday. They're going to pass these bills together, probably. That's my prediction. They'll pass it at something like 1.5 to 1.7, probably 1.5. And then they will, instead of actually trying to fight for a better bill, they'll just run a PR campaign talking about how the bill is super big and it's FDR-like, and then they'll do a victory lap, even though it's 7% of what we actually need compared to Bernie's Green New Deal. And Bernie's Green New Deal isn't even as good as the Green Party Green New Deal. So Bernie also is not blameless in this. Nothing would make me happier than for him to, grow a pair in the Senate and just say, screw you, Joe Manchin. We're not doing 1.5. We're doing 8. How do you like them apples? And then we're negotiating. Then it looks like they're actually fighting. But right now, Kulinski wants to make it look like there's a tug of war going on. And if there's a tug of war going on, it's Manchin's here, Bernie's here, and they're just getting yanked this way as fast as we can possibly do it. So there's a facade that there's actually a fight going on right now, and Kyle is perpetuating that facade, and it drives me crazy because his platform's so big and he knows AOC personally. Why don't just call her and go, listen, go and rally in these people's states, start asking your fans to make their lives hell, and they will listen to you, but you don't organize anything. So it drives me crazy. If I had Kyle's channel and I were a founder of the Justice Democrats, there's nothing I'd be doing more than torching the Justice Democrats for what they're doing to the infrastructure bill right now, or for allowing it to get whittled down to nothing. So if it turns out that they vote this bill down, I will eat my words. But Nancy Pelosi just came out yesterday and said to the squad, don't you dare shoot this down and embarrass Joe Biden before he goes to this summit. And I would like for Kyle Kulinski to show me one time since the squad has been in office that they have done something that Nancy Pelosi didn't want them to do.
Yep.
So they're going to shoot the bill down, they're not going to shoot the bill down. They're going to pass it at 1.5-ish. And instead they'll just reframe it as if it's something monumental. And in fact, Jamal Bowman already tweeted today that he's on board for it in its current form. And Ro Khanna went on Bree Joy's show 2 days ago, and she dismantled him, and he said that he was okay with the $1.7 trillion bill, which that's where it was 2 days ago. Now it's down to 1.5, and I guarantee you he's okay with the 1.5 as well. These people are absolutely going to pass this bill, and all of the Kulinskis and the Sam Cedars and the TYTs and the David Doles, and as I call them, the squad suckers, watch the AOCs of the world pass this bill. It makes them look like fools because they've been running cover for them and saying, don't be mean to the squad for a year. That's why you see all of these people also on Twitter. I don't know if you guys have noticed. They're all like, kill the bill, kill the bill. They're backpedaling now because they're like, oh shit, we've been covering for these people that we said they had a spine for like a year now, and it looks like they're all going to vote for this shitty ass bill, and that makes us look like idiots. So now they're trying to absolve themselves on Twitter like, oh, we had nothing to do with that. We're going to say right now that we're against them passing this bill. No shit. But the only reason that it got to this point in the first place is because people like you enable the squad to not do anything. So I'm not allowing them off the hook. I'm not allowing any of them off the hook. Once the squad does what we've been saying they're going to do for the last year, I'm going to brand these people with the scarlet A for asshole for the rest of their careers. I'm not letting it go because this was their game plan. This was their game plan. But again, like I said, if we get the $3.5 trillion bill or something in the realm of 2.5 to 3.5 and the squad really grows a spine and we get that a month from now, I'll eat my words. But there's no way that's going to happen.
No, like I agree. I just think it's really disappointing. Obama, I was just talking about this earlier. Obama has like come forward and said that we need to suck it up, that progressives need to suck it up. Rich, wealthy Obama, who has a house in Martha's Vineyards, is telling the poor people that they need to just suck it up. And this is the biggest problem I want people to pay close attention to. It's more about class than it is about left versus right. Because even people on the left who are wealthy, like the people on this thumbnail that I showed you, at the end of the day, they go where the money is, not so much where the issues are. I'm going to show you guys this tweet from earlier. This is from Emma Vigland. And she's known to have some cringe-like tweets, but Nico called her out. So she said, the paid leave news has me left almost speechless with rage. All I'll say for now is Biden botched this in two ways. One, by waiting and not riding the momentum of the early 2021 stimulus. And two, here we go again, not getting ahead of Sinema and Manchin's predictable villainy with massaging pressure. Here's what Nico said. So he quote tweeted this and said, LOL, it's cute that she's trying to pretend Biden actually wants anything good for us and that Democrats aren't doing exactly what Biden wants them to do. She's a WWE commentator at this point. Luci, I want to get your take.
I mean, I already kind of like the same thing I feel about Kyle, I feel about Emma Vigland. She is able to play the victim a little bit more than him because she's a woman. And when she does it, it's, you know, just as outrageous, but even more annoying. I find her very annoying. I can't really put my finger on it. But I don't know where she gets this idea that Biden is a good guy and, you know, Manchin and Sinema are worse than him. That just doesn't make sense. It's not an accurate view of the past 40 years. Biden has done horrible things in this country. He has a horrible track record of doing all kinds of horrible things. So, you know, I really don't understand it at all. But I actually wanted to say something too about the Build Back Better. Because I used to work in the construction industry. And I feel like all of these so-called social democrats, or even some of these like social democrats that are rebranding themselves as socialists and sometimes even communists, because it's like very unclear to see where people are right now. Some of them, like their ideology is failing them very badly. And I have to say, like, as someone that worked in the construction industry, one of the last remaining reasons to vote for the Democrats, because it's obvious they didn't end the wars. They're not going to implement any kind of racial justice. They're not going to provide affordable housing, Medicare for all, nothing that people really need, right? Student debt relief, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the last remaining reasons to actually vote for them was because they usually were, in the past, better at passing some type of infrastructure bill. And I still remember the Obama years, even though they were like extremely disappointing in all kinds of ways. I did get work like in Sandy recovery because there was like a large amount of federal government money allotted to that project. So I was like working the entire time, right? And they also, the Obama administration, they also put money into like Amtrak. They put out all of these projects like planning for high-speed rail. that was like the last remaining thing where it was like, okay, maybe it is a little bit better to vote for the Democrats. Now that they're completely unable to even pass an infrastructure bill to put some people to work, and that half of that bill is watered down anyway, because part of what they're doing isn't really public investment in infrastructure. It's going to get watered down into super dangerous, is because it's basically like a way to sell off the wealth of this country. Like I know you guys remember a few months ago how they wanted to privatize the post office, the United States Postal Service. And that is extremely dangerous, to like privatize those public services that are really necessary for a country to run well. Like if you privatize all the roads, the toll fees are going to go up. If you privatize the post office, shipping fees are going to be out of control, and the cost of business just gets really, really high. And that's really bad for everyone. It's bad for big business. It's bad for small business. You're going to get like monopolies like Amazon shipping everyone's stuff. Everything's going to get really expensive. So the fact that they cannot even pass an infrastructure bill, to me at least, because like in my mind, one of the only reasons to ever vote for a Democrat was the assurance that at the very least, I would find a job more easily, like the people that work in the construction industry. And that's gone. That's gone today. Like those days are over. So yeah, that's like what I have to say about that. They're just completely there's nothing I can say that's good about them anymore. Nothing.
Remember, Joe Biden insisted he can reach across the aisle. That was his thing. I'm the guy that can get things done, right? That was like his one selling point. He's like, Bernie sucks because he can't get anything done. Oh yeah?
Yeah.
It looks like you can't even whip your own party. So what are you talking about? Build Back Better never sounded so hollow as it does right after an infrastructure bill that doesn't build anything back passes.
Yep.
And it's going to be also really dangerous because part of the bill, they also watered it down further by saying that because they don't want to raise taxes for the rich to pay for this infrastructure bill, what they want to do is tax enforcement. And what do you think tax enforcement is? Do you think it's going to be like tax enforcement on the super rich? No, it's going to be tax enforcement on middle-class families, on lower middle-class families. And ever since they started with this Build Back Better stuff, like the tax offices have been getting all kinds of like more audits basically than ever for clients that earn under like $50,000 a year. Like basically auditing the smallest businesses to see what kinds of taxes they can squeeze out of like regular families. And that's what's been going on under the Biden administration. Like tax-wise, we're more squeezed now than we were under Trump. And I don't like Trump. I'm not planning to vote on for Trump either when he might run again in 2024. But that's a really bad sign. If like fiscally, you are clamping down on like lower income families more than the Trump administration to audit them and like find cases of tax evasion, that's really messed up. And that's part of how you can read it in the list of ways they plan to pay for this big infrastructure bills and Build Back Better, the Biden administration. It's really messed up.
Yeah, and worse than that, they're actually they said they weren't going to give any tax deductions to the rich. They're actually pushing SALT tax deductions in the bill as well, which that's state and local tax that only rich people usually can deduct from their federal income taxes, because in state and local taxes, that's mostly like property taxes as an example. And the rich have all of the property, so they get this enormous tax loophole that they can write off on their federal taxes because of their property that they own. So they're actually giving a tax break to the rich. So it's crazy. And I just want to throw out one stat there, you guys. The Build Back Better plan right now costs $1.5 trillion. You want to pay for it up front? The billionaires in America, since the beginning of COVID, an article just came out, have increased their wealth $2.1 trillion. So a 60% wealth tax on just money made in the last 1.5 years on just the billionaires would pay for this up front. That's something you might want to drop on your friends.
my
They
God.
tell you this can't be paid for. They've increased their wealth $2.1 trillion. 1.5 is like what 60% of that. You do 60% wealth tax just over the last 18 months on just billionaires, and you pay for it up front. But they're not going to even do that.
Yeah,
That's
like I
700
don't
people.
understand. Like, there's a point where it's like there's so much inequality and it's increasing because of the pandemic. Like, how much blood do they think they can squeeze from a stone? Like, it's just out. There's a point where there's really like there's not more money they can squeeze out. Like, what?
And Joe Manchin came out yesterday and said he's now he's definitely against the billionaire tax. He's joining Kirsten Sinema, who led the charge on killing the billionaire tax. Right? Manchin called the billionaire tax divisive. That's why he goes, it divides the billionaires from the regular people to single them out like that. Excuse you? Divisive? Okay, that tells you everything you need to know about Manchin and Sinema, but it basically said, no, there's not going to be any wealth tax in this, even though that would be the easiest way to just like pay for this up front. And if I may, your friend Steve Grumbine would agree with me in saying that we don't have to pay for this up front. It's ridiculous if you believe in MMT to even say that we have to. We could do a plan that's $2 trillion a year for the next decade and pay for it up, or do it because we're investing in infrastructure and in the people in a way that it builds our GDP and gives money back to us. So it's ridiculous to even act like you have to pay for it up front in the first place. But just theoretically, you heard that Elon Musk is worth $300 billion as of today, right? You could probably pay for the entire infrastructure bill by simply taxing the top 5 or 10 richest people in the country. That's it. Something like a 70% to 80% wealth tax on just wealth accumulated over the last 2 years. Because, I mean, you've seen Jeff Bezos, he's gone up, 80 billion. Zuckerberg's gone up of 40 billion. You've got Elon Musk has gone up 100 and something billion, $200 billion. If you wanted to, you could raise $1.5 trillion from just the billionaires if you did a wealth tax. But that's not even on the table because Manchin said so. And Bernie doesn't have the spine to stand up to Manchin and Sinema.
Yeah, I want to shout out Roger Meadows. Thanks so much for the super chat. 2 New Yorkers, Kyle and Cedar, couldn't be bothered to cover our fight to pass the New York Health Act when we were in Albany. We are gearing up for another fight. I want to see them cover. Good luck with that, Roger.
Yeah, I love Roger. He's a great guy.
Yeah, because the thing is, I've noticed if it's not attached to electoral politics, oftentimes they don't talk about it. It's like it's got to be attached to a politician or upcoming election. One of the things that it kind of reminds me what Chris Hedges was talking about. I'm gonna play this clip for a second. Chris Hedges was talking about boutique leftists, and this is when he was on Bad Faith. So I want to play this clip because this is what I feel like. And ignore me. I'm in the corner of this video, but just ignore me. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Because I feel like this is often like what we're seeing now, like people that I thought were like really left and were willing to fight for these issues with us. Like now I just feel like they're just boutique leftists. So I'm going to play this real quick.
Half the left thinks that you shouldn't talk about third parties. Half the left literally calls the other half the dumb left for articulating any value or interest in third party candidacies. Half the left thinks that the other half of the left is monstrous villains who attack women of color for critiquing the efficacy of squad members, right? One might call them the institutional left, is doing the work, I would argue, of backing people away from exactly those strategies that would create fear that is useful for us. And they're doing it under the cover of saying, well, we have all of these team players on the inside, we have to protect them now. The House discourse is silly, but when people say, okay, well, my critique of Hasan Piker, and this is a critique that I've seen that I'm articulating, I'm not, staking a claim here, but that, because he is opposed to third parties, because he generally speaking is, defensive of the squad members, because he wasn't supportive of efforts like Force the Vote, that is part of why we're frustrated that he has been able to earn so much money and buy this house, let's say. And that the people who are doing the best in the left ecosystem are the people, not frankly Jimmy Dore, he's an outlier there, I'd say, but are the people who have kind of closed ranks around lefty institutional actors, perhaps for access reasons, perhaps who knows why. It could be sincere sympathies. But that's part of what's motivating, I think, this fracture. It's not all superficial.
When I went to seminary, I went to Harvard Divinity School. I lived in Roxbury, and I commuted into Cambridge every day. And that's where I say I learned to hate liberals. All these people sitting around talking about empowering people they never met. They were flying off to Nicaragua to pick coffee a week with the Sandinistas and coming back and talking about it for the rest of the semester. Those are the kind of activists you're speaking about, boutique activists who have traditionally been and remain utterly irrelevant, not important, and not worth your time or your energy even responding to.
Okay, I thought that was like well said by Chris Hedges. But I do want to say, in reference to the Hasan Piker thing and the whole issue that came up with his house and all that jazz or whatever, I actually do think that is a problem, though, because Hasan Piker is telling people that force the vote was stupid. He's constantly defending the squad. He says he doesn't like simp for politicians, but he has a cutout of Bernie and like behind him, like in the video. And so my whole thing is like, you're worth millions of dollars. And you're going to tell people in this country that don't have healthcare, that need healthcare, that need to fight for these things during a pandemic, you're going to tell them that forcing the vote is stupid. But it's easy for you to say that because you already have it. And this is the thing that frustrates me. I feel like it all comes down to the class issue. And I feel like this was something I didn't pay attention to, I think, like when Bernie was running, because I was like, we're all on the left. We're all supposed to be together, right? We're all for Bernie. But once Joe Biden won, I started to see that, like, well, maybe we're not all together. Maybe the class divide was always there, and I just didn't really see it because we were all rooting for Bernie. So in that sense, it was like Bernie brought people together that we probably would have never, under other circumstances, we probably would have never came together. What do you guys think about that?
As far as Hasan Piker owning a nice house, I'm not against that, of course. And I think Nick Cruz would agree with me. He goes, we're Marxists. We're not against having wealth. We're against hyper wealth gotten by exploitation. So I don't really care about Hasan Piker's house if his rhetoric was correct. So like I wouldn't go after Jimmy Dore for exactly the same thing. But Jimmy, he gets flack from people like Hasan or people that follow Hasan for having a nice house. But then Hasan has twice as expensive of a house and he's half the age. So, but you're right. The rhetoric is he's made millions of dollars off of basically running cover for the squad so that the average people of this country, the poors, can't have nice things like he does. And that drives me crazy. Now, if I may, I'd like to bring up the Met Gala and the dress, because this kind of ties in with the same type of thing. Now, Kulinski's take on the Met Gala dress, where AOC wore the tax the rich dress to that extremely, it costs like $30,000 to get into the Met Gala, something like that. His take was insufferable. Here's mine. If you purport to be a socialist and you're going to something like that, the optics are awful, because a real socialist would go, that's disgusting. I'm not going to go hang out with these oligarchs. You couldn't pay me to do so. Now, the other part is that a lot of people were saying, well, she's protesting. Isn't this nice? Diva'sDoodles like, oh, it's actually good to do something like this. This is protesting in her own way. No, protesting would be joining the protesters outside the Met Gala who were having their heads smashed off of the pavement by police officers. So like it drives me crazy for an optics reason, but it drives me crazy because it seems like they're doing everything they can to maintain the facade that these people are fighting for us and that they happen to still be activists when they clearly are not. Now, that brings me to Kyle's, again, taking the middle ground on this. Did you guys see the video? His video on the Met Gala was one of his most popular videos, but for the wrong reasons. He got kind of ratioed on it. It's that he goes, well, I kind of see both sides where, like, yeah, she's kind of doing what she can, but at the same time, I wish she would go protest outside. It's like, no, there's an obvious right choice here, Kyle, by the way, and it drives me insane when he takes the middle. And what did he do? He goes, He goes, this is what drives me the craziest about the left, is they're always so divisive. The people on the far left are mad at AOC because she's not doing enough. And the people that like AOC and that are standing for her, they're saying that she does a great job. And I disagree on both fronts. It's like, well, then everybody hates you, Kyle. Why don't you pick the right choice instead of just backing off and acting like everyone is stupid and that you're holier than thou in a lot of ways. So he got ratioed on that as well. And to come full circle, if he truly cared about socialism, even just like mild democratic socialism, which he purports to be for, he would be disgusted by that stunt by AOC.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be calling out the boutique left and right, and he would be calling out the squad left and right. But instead, he's going down and joining them. And that's kind of what I've been trying to stop him from doing on my show after, the last 12 months, just going after him relentlessly, is I'm just like, no, don't go to the dark side. But it seems that money has corrupted him. If he wasn't already like planning this out, in the past, a career in politics that made him a lot of money, it seems obvious to me now. These takes are getting ratioed by even his own audience. So everybody sees through it. He's been co-opted in a similar way that AOC has, which is why he can't come out on the side of, well, that's ridiculous that AOC went and did that fake activist stunt, because he's doing the exact same thing.
And they're part of the same class, because AOC is not, there was this story, like when she first started running, that she grew up in the Bronx, that she grew up poor. AOC's dad was an architect. She's not, I'm not saying her parents did not grow up that way, but her dad was an architect. She went to Boston University. And they're pretty picky about where they pick people from to go to BU. It's all about zip codes. Trust me, I know. And so my whole thing is that when people say that we're being divisive, whenever we talk about like, well, we need these are urgent issues to us, we need these things now, we're told we're being divisive. I think the division is in reference to class, because people like him and Emma Vigland and Hasan Piker, they can say that we should just wait for these things and be patient, because they already have those things. It's not urgent to them. Those of us who really need to have those things, we're like, well, no, we need to have this stuff now. This is what Bernie ran on. This is what we were all fighting for. So again, at the end of the day, were they really fighting for those things to begin with, or is it just all optics?
It's a great question. I don't know. I think money has a lot to do with it. And I think a lot of it also has to do with what Kyle Kulinski himself calls DC brain, where they get in their own little bubble and they forget what they were fighting for because they happen to be surrounded by other elitists who all they can talk about is how the squad's doing great things. They're not even giving incrementalism, and they're trying to make it look like it's, they're making mountains out of molehills. No, you're not even making molehills. It's really, really embarrassing. And that's why I go after him on a regular basis, because you're right. It seems like this is, in this country, we're going to have to fight this class war. And it seems to me that those people you just mentioned, and Kyle Kulinski in particular, has decided what side he's on. He's got enough money now. He's a millionaire, by the way. I believe he's a millionaire. And he has chosen to play on their side, which means he's going to play it safe and use kid gloves whenever he talks about the squad, if he talks about them or critiques them at all. And that's sad to see, because he'd be a nice weapon. I've always said it would be nice for him to go after TYT and euthanize them the way that he did to the Hill back in the day when Crystal left. He dropped a video on the Hill that made them lose 245,000 followers in a couple of weeks. So he has the clout.
But that also was about him. See, that's the thing. That's something where he was personally directly affected. And that's the thing. Like, if you're not the one, a lot of times I've noticed this with these issues, if you're not directly affected, you're less likely to really fight for it. I want to shout out these super chats really quick. Thanks so much, Delthea Simmons. Politics are the practice and study of power. If you vote for choices you didn't design, your vote is not an act of power. It's a surrender of power. Thanks so much for the super chat. And there's one more from Steve. Thanks, Steve. Find JB Font's show and Faint Signals from Vega on YouTube. These channels need to grow. Thank you, Sabby. Thanks so much, Steve. Luci, what's your take on all this?
I mean, I think Bernie's candidacy was like awakening for a lot of people, but also very confusing. because he called himself a democratic socialist, right? And obviously, like right now, with like there's so much inequality in our country, more than ever before. You know, like they say hasn't been this much inequality since the Gilded Age or something like this. You know, it's really, really bad right now. And because we're in this crisis of capitalism, basically, and I'm not saying that communist countries don't have their own problems. Like, I'm not someone that idealizes the other side, but we are in a crisis of capitalism here in this country, right? And I feel like a lot of the smarter, liberal, but like more establishment-leaning people like Emma Vigland, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, all of these people, Kyle Kulinski, they know that we're in a crisis of capitalism, basically, and they are choosing to rebrand themselves. They're choosing to rebrand themselves because they know how unpopular it is right now to just be a liberal. And they know that it will sink their platforms and their money-making machine to just like come out and say, I'm just like a regular liberal. I'm just a regular Democrat. So what they do instead is, you know, they basically like, they'll always be putting roses. That's why I don't even trust people's labels anymore. Because you don't know who is what, right? I almost prefer that you don't put a rose on your Twitter bio right now. And, you know, with regard to Hasanabi making $200,000 a month and not giving any of it to charity, Kyle went on that YouTube link that I sent you. I don't think we're going to play it today. But he went on saying that he also doesn't care that Hasanabi makes that much money, and he looked like he was impressed. And Ben Shapiro came on arguing with Kyle Kulinski, and he was basically saying hypocrisy. This is what Ben Shapiro said: hypocrisy is always news. When you're a socialist and you say that you believe in redistributive policies, and on a personal basis, and not only you're a socialist, you actually make money from that. And in a personal basis, you don't participate in any kind of aid or like any kind of visible aid. You know, you come across as much of a hypocrite as someone on the religious right that has affairs on the side, right? And I hate to say it, but I really found myself agreeing with Ben Shapiro in that moment. And the fact that I did is very, very bad for Kyle Kulinski. So if, Kyle Kulinski needs to understand, and like all of these, like, you know, boutique left, whatever, that we, like some of us at least, are copying to the game, that we know that they're trying to rebrand themselves as socialists and sometimes even communists, but they're still playing the establishment like line, because they know how unpopular they will be if they just like actually come out as regular Democrats. The Democratic Party is less popular than ever right now, so they don't want to lose this like media machine that they've built. They know that they would tank, and they're. I don't think we should like they have so many subscribers as well, you know, like I'm just like, you know, a random like asshole on YouTube. These people have like a lot of media power, and they're very smart, you know, they were smart enough to get there. And like, that's all I have to say. Like, for people to really be careful, like not to trust these labels, you know, just because someone says that they're a conservative doesn't mean they'll never be on your side. Just because someone says that they're a socialist, it doesn't mean they're always going to be on your side. So like, you know, just like be aware, you know, see what happens from moment to moment, see what positions they take in the future. Like, you know, and just like as an overall behavioral pattern, what are these people actually doing? They're discouraging us from voting for a third party or building one, yes. But in addition to that, they'll say things like, okay, we don't agree with a strategy of voting for a third party. Fine, there's lots of Americans that don't agree with the strategy. That's fine, but we're gonna push them. But then when people try to push the people that are already in office, they complain about that too. So no matter what angle you take, like they're clearly not supporting us, whether it's with the third party strategy or without the other strategy. They don't agree with any strategy. Every time someone comes up with a strategy, they come up with a way to stand in the way and bitch about it. You know, like, and it doesn't even take that much to be supportive. And I don't even care if Kyle Kulinski personally doesn't go himself to the Medicare for All protest. If he was just like mildly supportive of Force the Vote on Twitter without making excuses, or if he was just mildly supportive, that would be enough for me. It really would. And I wouldn't even be that hard on him. But you know, these people they're really gatekeeping for the establishment, and they're doing it in a way that they know will appease their audience, because they know that capitalism is in crisis, and they're rebranding themselves to make themselves more palatable to us. So yeah, like that's what I have to say about them.
It's true. That's like having those middle takes. That's like having those middle takes. I have that video. I'm going to start it from the Ben Shapiro part. You want me to start it from that part, Lucy?
Oh, you got it? Yeah.
Sorry. My Twitter DMs are a mess, man. I'm telling you. That's why sometimes I'm like, people are like, I DM'd you this 3 weeks ago. And I'm like, what? All right. Let me go ahead and thanks so much for the super chat, Debate Me channel. Blue Moon Red Wine. I speak on this on my channel a lot. Separate art from artists. They are characters doing entertainment. Politics is separate. 100%. 100%. Thanks so much. So for the first time ever, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to play something from Ben Shapiro on this channel. So here we go. Let me mute my mic.
Always newsworthy. If somebody is a religious Christian and then they have an affair, this is a newsworthy event, according to the media. If there's a politician who's right-wing, that politician turns out to be gay. Really, really newsworthy, according to the media. But there's one area of hypocrisy that is just not newsworthy to the media, like truly not newsworthy. And that, of course, is if you are a socialist who's extremely wealthy and gives very little charity. If you are that person, then hypocrisy just doesn't play a part. Hypocrisy is never a problem, because after all, you're calling for societal change. You yourself don't have to abide by any of those rules, because some animals are more equal than other animals. But the socialist has the benefit of the bargain, because you get to be as socialist as you want to, like Bernie Sanders, and then you get to have a lake house. You get to be a millionaire while proclaiming that billionaires are paying the flesh up. Okay, so this issue has become relevant over the course of the past couple of days, because a guy named Hasan Piker, who I believe used to be a Young Turks guy, I don't really know that much about him. He apparently is a socialist Twitch streamer. There's a big article, big glowing profile about him in New York Magazine titled "Streaming with Hasan Piker, the AOC of Twitch. I'm a political commentator with stands." Okay, well, in the past few months, Hasan Piker, it turns out, has been revealed to be a very wealthy person, which is good for him. He has a lot of folks who are following him over at Twitch. That is his prerogative, and I'm glad for him that he's been able to build a following. But a couple of times in the last month, it's been revealed that this out-and-out socialist, I mean, this is what he calls himself, that he is a very wealthy man. Quote, Hasan Piker was in a rage. 1 million tabs were pinched together like sardines at the top of his browser. His jittery cursor bounced between them, summoning network news, Chiron's YouTube rants, viral tweets, and TikTok memes. The day's trending topic? Piker, who is 30, had purchased a $2.7 million house in West Hollywood. An ordinary Twitch streamer's housing wouldn't make headlines, but over the past 5 years, Piker has become one of the most prominent socialist pundits in America. The controversy about the purchase had made it to Fox News and Breitbart, and Piker was prepared to take on the interlopers who logged on to see the fireworks. Quote, the only reason my house is expensive is because of the area I live in, he growled. Are you guys really that stupid? That's not even a response to the charge. The charge is that for a socialist, you seem to be spending large, my friend. It doesn't you could have, there are a lot of places that are not in West Hollywood that don't cost $2.7 million. They're all over the United States. You can get yourself a tiny little shack and live yourself the Henry David Thoreau lifestyle for probably 30 grand somewhere. $2.7 million bucks, a lot of money. I don't see you handing that out to all of the immiserated workers in the Marxist social construct. Right? That's the charge. And his response is, well, of course it's expensive around here. This is West Hollywood, which of course is not a response. Piker said 3 weeks later, quote, as long as you don't defang your core values, as long as you're still speaking truth to power, then F them. Yeah, speaking truth to power is being the guy who buys the $3 million house and does interviews with New York Magazine and then jabbers about how the rich don't pay their fair share. He says, I don't give a bleep. I'm doing this in the least exploitative way you functionally effing can. Really? He says, it's my labor. I'm the one who's streaming for 10 hours. Welcome to capitalism, my dude. It's my labor? Yes, whose labor? So, in other words, you bet on yourself, you've done really well, and you believe that you deserve to keep the proceeds of that labor.
It's hilarious that he said that at the end. He goes, a worker is entitled to the fruits of his own labor. And then he says, welcome to capitalism. Actually, it's the exact opposite. The surplus value is extracted by the owner, by the boss, by whoever runs the company. That would be capitalism. So in other words, think of a business as a rigid hierarchy. Think of a business as essentially a dictatorship or a tyranny. You have the owner of the business who's at the top, and then they have like usually a manager underneath them, and then they have the workers underneath them. And the whole point is whatever the person at the top says goes. So no, if you're a worker, if you're at the bottom of that equation, you are most certainly not entitled to the fruits of your own labor. Not at all. In fact, there's been a giant decoupling in the United States. We've shown you the charts, we've shown you the graphs of worker productivity versus how much money the workers are making. So they're producing way more than they get. So that would be capitalism. That'd be the problem with capitalism. And so Hasan Piker's point is, well, a worker is entitled to the fruits of his own labor. That's what he says. And if Ben Shapiro believed that, he'd be a lot further left on the political spectrum. Now, again, to Hasan Piker and how much money he makes. Hasan is correct. He does all the streaming. I don't know if he has any employees. He may not. I really don't know. If he does have employees, I'm sure he pays them well. If he doesn't, and literally all him, then his argument is, yeah, I do all of it. So what do you want me to do? I don't understand like what the argument is. I happen to do well when I'm advocating for these ideas that I advocate for. Here's the thing. If that was the case and he did not argue for raising taxes on the rich, I would be against him. And I'd be saying that's messed up and that's not right because he's making so much money and he has to pay his fair share. But the fact of the matter is, Hasan Piker says Hasan Piker makes too much money and should pay higher taxes. So having said that, I don't see what the problem is. He happened to make a lot of money by advocating left-wing ideas, and he also holds true to those principles and says, raise my damn taxes. I will go out there on my stream and advocate 10 hours a day for you to raise taxes on me. So what exactly is the problem here? What exactly is the charge here? It's not like he made the money, and then all of a sudden he went from saying, raise my taxes to now, no, I think I should get a tax cut, or you should keep my taxes exactly the same. That would be a problem. That would be hypocrisy. That would be, I just crossed the bridge and I'm going to burn it behind me. He didn't do that. He didn't say that. So, I don't understand the issue here. They think it's like hypocrisy to be on the left and make a lot of money. But stop and think about that. These guys call you a loser if you make no money. So they attack you if you make no money. And then if you make a lot of money, they call you a hypocrite. So it's almost like they're going to attack you no matter what. Like they're working backwards from their conclusion. And this is exactly like the Bernie discourse when we learned Bernie has 3 houses and every idiot and their mother went after him and said, this is unacceptable. And of course, you read into the situation and you found out he lives in a very solidly middle-class home in Vermont. And then he's got a place in D.C. because he's in D.C. half the year because he's a senator. And then they inherited from like Jane's parents or something, this tiny, relatively small house on a lake that was some vacation home. Again, inherited it. So, and by the way, he's literally the most popular senator in the country, and he happened to write a book that was a bestseller. So his net worth is a little over $1 million. I mean, the dude has been in Washington, D.C. since 1784. I'm surprised he didn't trip over his own dick and make $100 million. Never mind making $1 million. So again, what's the issue here? Bernie Sanders wants to raise Bernie Sanders' taxes. Hasan Piker wants to raise Hasan Piker's taxes. They want to redistribute that wealth and give it back to the working class in the form of free college and universal pre-K and Medicare for all.
I'm sorry. Between his voice and Shapiro's voice and Kyle's really bad haircut, I had to stop the video. But Greg said Shapiro understands what capitalism and socialism are better than Kyle. Ugh. I am gonna cringe here for a minute because I never agree with Ben Shapiro, and I actually found myself agreeing with what Ben Shapiro said.
It's tough. It's not the only video he's done that too. Meaning he almost got ratioed on another one because Kyle has been getting ratioed a lot lately on his vaccine mandate vids. And he makes Ben Shapiro look like a genius because Ben Shapiro called Biden's vaccine mandate authoritarian. And Ben Shapiro is right. So this isn't the only thing this has happened on. Now, as far as the Hasan Piker thing goes, again, if Hasan's rhetoric was correct and he were literally like pushing Marxian style rhetoric and he were very upset with the squad and very upset with the Democratic Party on the daily and just ripping them apart for not helping poor people, then I wouldn't have a problem with him accumulating wealth. And in fact, I'm not against accumulation of wealth. I'm against accumulation of hyper wealth via exploitation, right? And I don't think Hasan is necessarily exploiting anybody, but you're right. He comes off as looking like a hypocrite because if you call yourself a socialist and you have millions and millions of dollars and you spend it all on yourself, it seems to me that you're putting out optics that make it look like you don't really give a shit about the poor. So like if I had as popular a podcast or Twitch account as Hasan did, do you think I'd go out there and buy a mansion? No. I would like fix some things around my house, pay off my student loans, and then I take all of my excess money and try to like end homelessness in my hometown. I would figure out some way to give back and use my resources to like start up communes that can be self-run by homeless people and they can take care of it themselves. And all they have to do is just like fix the boiler, prepare their own food, keep the place clean. And you could end homelessness in my hometown of Peoria for probably less money than he spent on that damn house. So it does look ridiculous. But again, I'm not really against Jimmy Dore or Hasan Piker owning nice things so long as their rhetoric is correct. And that's why I get mad because Hasan's fans will go after Jimmy Dore hardcore for owning a house that's half as valuable, and he's been in the game longer than Hasan is. But Jimmy's the one telling the truth. So I'm trying to be straight across the board. It's like I don't give a crap if either of you guys have nice things so long as your rhetoric's correct. And that's what drives me crazy about Hasan is that he won't force Joe Biden to put in like a top marginal tax rate of 91% like we need, like an FDR style, even LBJ style top marginal tax rate. Do you see Hasan Piker pushing for that? A huge tax rate that would take a chunk out of his savings? No, you don't. You don't see him doing that at all. But he will, and his fans will go after Jimmy Dore. So it's inconsistent. It's hypocritical. And of course, the optics are ridiculous because you can't really call yourself a socialist and then go out there and buy, multiple $1 million home. Go buy something that you can deal with and then use your immense wealth to actually help socialism get into this country in any way that you can.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, what are they doing with all that? So like I said, all the people that we mentioned tonight, all those people are wealthy, you guys. Like, we don't mean like hundreds, thousands of dollars a year wealthy. We're talking like millionaires. And Crystal Ball probably should have been on that thumbnail too. I can't speak for David Dole or Mike for whatever the hell, Humanist Report. I don't know for sure about them, but Crystal Ball should have been on that thumbnail too. Now that I think about it, these people are really rich. So some of these things that they preach to people about, or they preach to us about, like helping and things that people need in the community, why don't they take some of their millions and help the people in those communities?
I don't think they really believe it.
Yeah, and like the thing is, like, the way they're making their money, like, okay, people will compare Hasan to Jimmy Dore, but some people will compare Hasan, to like Susan Sarandon or something. Susan Sarandon is an actress, she didn't like make her living from LARPing as a populist. On YouTube or whatever, so like, Hasanabi, is that like how you say his name? It's Hasan, and like Hasanabi's his stage name. Is that
Hasanabi's his Twitter handle?
Okay. Sorry, I just didn't know. The way he's making his money is like donations, and I feel like it's kind of like, you know, for example, like nonprofits. It's not exactly a nonprofit, but people are giving their money to you because they expect you to advance some social cause. It's not the same as like making your money on the stock market or whatever. You know what I mean? You are out there preaching this thing, and if you don't follow it yourself, and this goes for Hasan and Jimmy Dore. I haven't looked into his finances either. Of like, I don't know their finances, and I do think there's something to be said when you donate to a nonprofit. You are required to show financial statements to see how effective they are at pushing their cause. And I feel like the same thing should apply to these kinds of things. You know, like these YouTube shows that allege that they further some social justice cause. I haven't done it because my channel's like 700 people and I've made $70. So like, I really don't think it's worth incorporating a nonprofit at that point. But, you know, like as you get bigger, and as you, like, if you get to the point where you make $200,000 a month, you should be like, you know, like showing some public accountability of where those like hard-earned dollars that people are giving you, what you're doing with them. I don't think it's too much to ask. And, you know, if you want to, if you feel like you've worked hard enough that you want to take like a $200,000 a year salary, whatever, fine. But like, you know, there's no accountability. There's financial statements for anyone, you know, and, you know, that's where we are. And with the progressive politicians, it's the same thing. People are throwing money at them and then they take their money and they give it to the corporate Democrats. They're like the best fundraisers right now. So this is just like the establishment rebranding themselves as socialists. They're not changing any of their strategies. They're not showing us financial statements. Even like, you know, if you look at like the World Bank accountability, like one of the basic things is just like basic financial transparency. You have to publish what you spend money on, how you spend money. And it's so ridiculous that Kulinski went on there and he was like, I don't know if he has employees, but I'm sure he pays them well. Like, you know, like he hasn't even looked into the fact, you know,
Uh-oh.
Creating this machine, and he just
all I know is just like, wow, man, wow, like that's the first time Ben Shapiro like really made sense to me, and so it's been a long time since I've heard his voice. And I never want to hear his voice again. Like the sound of his voice is just like, I forgot what he sounds like. I forgot, but
he's bad. He's bad. Yeah. But, you know, as you go towards neoliberalism, it's harder to combat those right wingers. Like Kulinski used to eat people like Dave Rubin, and he can still eat Dave Rubin alive, but like Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, those guys are so easy to beat as long as you are far left and you stick to your principles. But even Kulinski, he starts to look like a doofus because you move towards neoliberalism. Neoliberal ideology does not match up well with them. So like you said, you end up making Ben Shapiro look smart when it comes to things like vaccine mandates, comes to talking about, you know, enormous personal wealth when you call yourself a socialist. And I think this is also why Kulinski, he started calling himself a democratic socialist a couple of years back, and then he switched to social democrat, which is more towards the center than a democratic socialist. And now, if you guys noticed, the Squad and Bernie Sanders are trying to rebrand themselves as quote unquote pragmatic progressives, which that's an oxymoron. Literal oxymoron. And if you call yourself a pragmatic progressive, you're an actual moron. So we're only a couple of years away from Kulinski going, oh, I'm just a pragmatic progressive is all. No, you're not. You're a neoliberal shit zipper. That's what you are. And that's why you make Ben Shapiro sound smart sometimes. So I wish he would just have an awakening, come back to the actual side and start fighting for actual socialist policies. And let me tell you something. If you fight every day for socialist policies on your show, no one is going to give a damn if you gain wealth. But you have to be out there fighting and showing that you're earning your money and you're trying to make it so that there are no more poor people and so that there are no more hyper wealthy people as well. But if you're still calling yourself a socialist, but you're okay with people that, make an inordinate amount of money off of Twitch streaming, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and they're not actually having the correct rhetoric, meaning pushing the squad to fight for socialist policies, but they also go out and spend like $150,000 on a Lamborghini when they could go out and, build a homeless shelter for the same price. That just tells you everything you need to know about these people, because the way that you spend your money when you do get that status and that bank account does say a lot about how on board you are for actually changing the world. Right.
Mm-hmm.
When a billionaire goes out there and says, I'm going to donate $2 million to the homeless in this country, you go, oh, geez, you didn't even have to open your wallet for that barely. Like that's chump change for you. So when it's not really charity, it's not really anything socialist. It's just them going, well, I don't want to look like an asshole. So I'm going to go out there and donate some money, but it's not really a lot. And Hasan has enough money and influence now to make a huge impact. And like Kyle Kulinski, he has enough impact or enough of a clout where he can actually go after the squad on a regular basis and maybe get them to implement a top marginal tax rate that makes sense. But he's not going after them and trying to get them to have a big top marginal tax rate, is he? Neither is Kyle, because it seems to me that the goal for those two now is careerism, and that's corruption. And once you go down that path, guys, this is why it's a rule of Fight Club that you can't take donations from corporations. You can't sell out. Once you get a taste of money and you get that nice house, it makes it a lot harder to maintain your socialistic tendencies and rhetoric. Yep. And you must try to fight that as best you can. And they don't seem intent on fighting it whatsoever. They're just going to keep going down the TYT, taking the Katzenberg money road. And they're okay with that. And if that happens with Kyle, and it already seems to have happened to some extent with Hasan, but with Kyle, you'll know it when you see it, because they'll start talking exactly like TYT. And we're only a couple of years away from that, a couple of months away, maybe. We'll see. We'll see if Katzenberg has a conversation with Kulinski anytime soon. But if he did, and he offered Kulinski a lot of money, you bet your bottom dollar that Kulinski's going to change his rhetoric so that he can have a nice house.
Yep, that is true. That's the thing. I mean, we've seen it happen time and time again. When Kim Iverson was on here, she laid it all out. Like she explained all of the channels that people think are independent that aren't really independent and who they're affiliated with. So it's really interesting when you hear the behind the scenes. Shout out to Roger for the super chat. Use that money to start a worker co-op, real socialism.
100%.
That's a good point. JB has a good point. He said, but you have to understand Kyle isn't a socialist. He's a capitalist that wants guardrails on capitalism. Oh.
Yep. Social democrat is what he calls himself, which social democracies have shown that they're not robust enough usually to curb capitalistic tendencies in their governments. And Kyle knows this because he had Bhaskar Sankara on his Crystal Kyle and Friends show. It was like the second or third episode they did. And even he broke it down. He goes, even the major run-of-the-mill social democracies in Scandinavia that haven't gone hardcore towards socialism, they are still seeing capitalism rear its ugly head in their governments. So Kyle knows that it's still a recipe that doesn't make sense if you want the things that he purports to want, which is helping the poor and making sure that, there aren't super wealthy people in the country anymore. But he still hasn't moved farther left. He's moving farther right as he ages, moving closer towards his friends at TYT. And that's what concerns me. And that's why I go after him so hardcore on my channel. It breaks my heart to see him move that way. And I don't know what it is. I can only speculate.
I don't think TYT and them are friends anymore because they kicked him out. Someone mentioned earlier in the chat, and I lost it a long time ago. So I think it was Ashura. I'm sorry, Ashura. mentioned it earlier in the chat that Kyle says he only has one friend now, and that's Joe Rogan, because of everything that happened with TYT.
Yeah, and he's even gone after, or not gone after, but disagreed with Joe Rogan recently and got ratioed for it on his channel for going after him and saying that ivermectin doesn't have any like effectiveness when it comes to treating COVID, which is a lie, by the way. And he says that this in the beginning of an episode that just came out, CNN triples down against Joe Rogan is what it's called. He says at the beginning that ivermectin doesn't work. Joe Rogan got that from an MD, by the way. So are you saying, Kyle, that you disagree with your boy Joe Rogan and an MD in attempt to say that ivermectin doesn't work? So even Joe is going to turn on him at some point because he's disagreeing with him on something that Joe is correct on, and the science backs up. So he's about to have no friends.
I didn't know about that.
That's a recent episode. I was going to talk about it. I'm going to probably talk about it on my show tomorrow or the next day.
Only talk about it on Rockfin, Rob.
I know. I don't want to get in too much trouble.
Anything else you guys want to mention? I mean, like, basically, like, the point that we're trying to bring is that these people have a lot of subscribers and they reach large amounts of people. And that message, that's the message that is going out. And that's the unfortunate part, because people do need to realize that the squad is not doing what they should be doing. People do need to realize that Joe Biden is not doing a good job. And I don't think it's fair that they're able to just lie to masses of people just so they can get paid. That's what pisses me off. Luci?
Yeah, I mean, I've been sour on these people for a while. I have a random announcement. Is it okay if I make an announcement?
Do it. It's Friday.
Okay. I've been listening and learning from you guys, Political Fight Club and FHL, and I was thinking of doing a Latino roundtable next Wednesday. If anyone would like to join, please email me. The email is bmrwshow@gmail.com. It's bmrwshow@gmail.com. And if you join us for this or a future roundtable, you'll get to meet Franco, who's really a great guy. Yeah.
I put it in the chat. Yeah,
Thank
Franco's awesome.
Yeah.
Rob, you want to plug too?
I don't have a plug, but I do have a closing statement where I'm going to kind of lay Kyle out on a gurney real quick. Give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
So the issue that I have with Kyle is that he has a leg to stand on when it comes to going after the squad. He has a platform. He helped them get into office. They know who he is, and he has a massive amount of subscribers. So he can actually influence these people. Now, one of Kyle's heroes, and I disagree with this, but one of his heroes is Noam Chomsky. What Noam Chomsky always says when it comes down to fighting the good fight in politics is that you have a responsibility to go after the people and to correct the things that are under your control, right? So that's what he always says about, like, when the U.S. is talking about imperialism overseas. He goes, no, listen, we have a responsibility to not go and invade these other countries and try to correct their immoralities. We have a responsibility to correct our own immoralities back here because they happen to be our responsibility and we can vote them away. So you have a responsibility to go after the people that you have control over, that you can influence, right? Kulinski does not do this. He does not take his advice that he said numerous times on his show and that the advice that he takes from Chomsky, because if he did, he would be constantly going after the squad and TYT and other lefties who are moving farther towards the center and farther right and taking more and more money. But instead, he chose to go after, in a 38-2 ratio, as I just laid out over the last 2 months, going after righty YouTubers and mainstream media who he doesn't have any sway over, who are never going to listen to him. So, Kulinski, take your hero Noam Chomsky's advice. Go after and influence the things that you actually can. But he doesn't do that at all. So the channel is more or less useless when it comes to actually influencing things. And the thing that makes me so angry is that any of us three had his channel and his influence, we would be influencing things that are good. by going after certain people and by calling people out, but he won't do that. And that's why it drives me crazy. So in summation, Kyle, listen to your boy Noam Chomsky. He says that you have a responsibility to cover the things that you actually have some influence over. There's actually a chance that you might actually get something done. But Kulinski doesn't do that at all. And it drives me crazy. And if I may, if you want to go check out Kyle Kulinski's channel, he is putting out hot videos such as The View trashes Tucker Carlson in favor of Pete Buttigieg. If you're putting out a video about The View talking about Pete Buttigieg and Tucker Carlson's beef, is there anything that leftists care less about than that? And if I may, one more thing, I went after him about this as well. He props Biden up quite a bit more than he should. And he put out an episode 3 weeks ago talking about Joe Biden's response to Kyrsten Sinema getting heckled in the bathroom. Remember those protesters went in there and asked her why she was gutting the bill? Yep. He talked about that. Joe Biden was asked in a conference what his response was to those protesters going into Kyrsten Sinema's bathroom. And he goes, well, it happens to everybody. Biden or Kyle did an episode about that response by Joe Biden, and he called it thugged out. If you're talking about Joe Biden's response to that question, meaning being asked about the protesters, and he goes, well, it happens to everybody, and you're calling it thugged out, you are looking for a reason to give Joe Biden a lot of credit for nothing. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Joe Biden is doing almost the same thing that Trump is, yet half the time Biden is propping him, or Kyle is propping up Biden. And that's what drives me crazy about him. He's not being honest. And if you scroll down his channel right now, you'll see he's looking for every reason available to not go after the squad and not go after Biden, and to give them tacit credit or full credit if he can. But everything he's giving them credit for is like what? You're calling him thugged out because he said that occasionally people get protesters that follow them around places? That's not a thugged out response. Are you out of your mind? So he's looking for a reason to defend the Democratic Party at every turn. And I despise that. And I'm going to continue to lay him out unless he changes his rhetoric. So that's what I got to say about that. And if you want to hear about, The View or, like these other things, like he talks about, he dropped 5 videos about Ben Shapiro, 12 videos about Tucker Carlson recently. It's like, there's been 2 videos critiquing the squad. Please.
The thugged out thing that you just mentioned just remind me of something. I know one time he called someone homeboy on Twitter, and I forget who it was. Oh, I think it was Misty from Facts on the Ground. She retweeted. She was like, homeboy? With like question mark or whatever. Kyle reminds me of some of the guys I went to undergrad with. They were like the white guys from New York, and they would say they were from New York City, but they were actually from the suburbs of New York City.
He's from Westchester.
Yeah, they
he's classic Westchester.
Yeah, like they were at like my school and stuff, and it's like every now and then they would try to throw in like, I guess, slang words to make it seem like they're cool, like homeboy and yo and thugged out. And it's just really weird to me. It's just like, what are you trying to do?
Every time
he's trying to sound cool when the rest of us are trying to sound like more educated and mainstream to like gain acceptability in the general population. Meanwhile, Kyle is from Westchester and he's always like thugging out with this like wigger thing he has going. It's really annoying.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. It just reminded me of some of the guys I went to college with, and I was just like, I remember just thinking to myself, like, why? What is the point of all of that? Why do you have it? But you 9 times out of 10 you don't talk like that. Like what the fuck?
Every time Kyle Kulinski goes, nah, dog, in my head go, nah, dog, you don't get to go, nah, dog. Like, what you doing, dude?
Oh man.
Oh man. Oh man. That was brutal. Thanks so much for coming on, guys.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Sabby.
All right, bye.
This episode was thugged out, man.
All right, love you guys. We'll see you later.
Bye. All right, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.